Every gardening guide tells you to plant level with the soil. Go deeper and you rot the crown. But the Royal Horticultural Society says do the exact opposite for one plant. Bury your clematis 3 inches deep, on purpose. That buried stem becomes a hidden backup plant, waiting underground to take over. If a mower, a hard frost, or even a rabbit wipes out the one on top, that backup is ready to step in. Here's the thing, this isn't some backyard trick your neighbour swears by. And there's one exact spot on that stem you can never bury by mistake. Get it wrong, and the whole trick rots instead of working. Stick with me, because by the end, you'll know exactly where that spot is, the actual science behind why this works, and the 3 steps to do it right. Now, that soil level rule exists for a good reason. Most extension services agree on this. Bury the root flare on a tree or shrub and moisture gets trapped. It sits right against the trunk. No air gets in. Fungi like Phytophthora can move in fast. University Extension Pathology research puts it at just 4 to 8 hours in saturated soil. Then rot sets in from the crown down. That's real. That's why garden centres hammer plant it level into every beginner. For almost everything you grow, they're right. But Clematis breaks that rule on purpose and for a documented reason. The Royal Horticultural Society, the International Clematis Society, and University Extension Services across the US all recommend it. They say to plant large flowered clematis with the crown 2 to 3 inches below the soil line. Not folklore, not a backyard guess. It's the official planting guide. You'll hear old-timers say things like, "My grandmother always buried her clematis deep." Turns out that folk wisdom lines up exactly with what the professionals recommend today. Kind of nice when Grandma and the scientists agree. Here's why this works. Buried 2 to 3 inches down, at least one woody, mature node ends up sitting safely underground. That's the leaf joint on a hardened stem, not the soft green growth near the tip. That node can grow its own roots and send up its own shoots, completely separate from whatever happens to the plant above ground. One quick note, this deep planting trick is really for the large flowered clematis you'll find at most garden centres. Smaller, viney types, the ones with tiny flowers, don't need it. Doesn't hurt them either, just isn't necessary. Think of it like this, you're not just planting one clematis. You're planting a second one, right below it. A backup. Sound asleep, waiting to wake up if the first one ever gets hurt. One quick heads up before you grab your trowel, clematis sap isn't kind to skin, dogs, or cats, so gloves on and trimmings out of reach. So here's how you actually do it. 3 simple steps, and none of them need fancy tools. Step 1 is easy. You'll dig the hole a little deeper than usual. The root ball should sit a full 2 to 3 inches below the surrounding soil, not level with it. That's it. Just a few extra minutes of digging. Step 2 is where most people slip up. Look for a node that's already turned brown and woody, not the Sophite green growth near the tip. That's the spot doing the work underground. You don't have to get this perfect, just make sure it's wood, not green. Takes about 30 seconds to check. Get that right, and step 3 is almost too easy. Step 3. You'll backfill gradually. As the plant grows taller through its first season, keep adding a little more soil around the base until you reach that 2 to 3 inch depth. That's it. 3 steps done once at planting time. And here's why it matters so much for this particular plant. Now here's the interesting part. Older sources used to call the cause of Clematis wilt a mystery. But Extension Services and the Royal Horticultural Society have landed on the same answer today. It's one fungus, renamed twice over the last century, but always the same organism. And they all agree on one thing. That fungus isn't systemic. It doesn't travel down into the roots. It girdles the stem above ground, cuts off the water flow, and then it stops. Which means the node you buried 2 to 3 inches down is sitting right below where that fungus typically can't reach. Sneaky, right? Your root system is almost always fine. Extension Services report the same pattern again and again. New shoots push up from the base within a few weeks. That happens if the damage stayed local, like one section of vine. If the whole plant above ground dies back completely, recovery usually waits until the following growing season instead. Either way, that buried node still gives you a solid backup plan. And if your clematis is already in the ground, planted level like everything else taught you, take a breath. You can still fix this. Mounding extra soil around the base this season builds most of that same protection going forward. So what does this actually protect against? Picture this. You're mowing along the fence line and the blade catches a low vine you didn't see. Ordinarily, that's the plant done for the season. Or a hard frost hits overnight and kills everything above ground. Or a rabbit chews the new growth down to nothing. Gardeners on extension forums and Clematis Society boards report the same outcome across all three. As long as that woody node stayed buried and undamaged, the plant sends up new growth from underground instead of just dying. And when a mower nicks that vine and it still comes back weeks later, that's the proof in the pudding. Local damage, like a mower nick or a rabbit bite, often bounces back within a few weeks. A full winter kill of everything above ground usually means waiting for fresh growth the following spring instead. Quick word of caution before we get to the mistakes. Clematis sap can irritate skin, and it's not something you want your dog or cat chewing on either. Keep cuttings and pruned stems away from young kids too. The sap can irritate their skin just like it does yours. Wearing gloves while you work and bagging up any trimmings to toss somewhere out of reach right away goes a long way toward keeping everyone safe. And here's something worth knowing. 3 mistakes that ruin this whole trick. 1. Burying soft green stem instead of a hardened node. It just rots in wet soil instead of rooting. 2. Not going deep enough. Less than 2 inches and you lose most of the protection. Nail those 2 and there's still one more sneaky way this trick fails. 3. Skipping a simple wire guard around a young plant its first year. A rabbit can still strip the top growth even when the node underground is safely out of reach. So here's the whole trick in one breath. The level with the soil rule is right for almost everything you grow. Clematis is the one exception, backed by the RHS, not backyard guesswork. When you find a woody node and bury it 2 to 3 inches down, you've built yourself a backup plant hiding underground. This trick is about as dirt cheap as gardening advice gets. It's literally just a little extra dirt against the cost of replacing a dead vine at the garden centre. This planting season, you've got the chance to get it right. By next spring, you could be looking at a vine that shrugged off a hard frost or a mower nick without missing a beat. Maybe you're the kind of gardener who'd rather plant it right once than replace it every couple of years. If so, you belong here. I'd love to hear in the comments what zone you're gardening in. Has your clematis ever come back from something that should have killed it? Deep planting protects the node, and watching it come back stronger is half the fun. Happy gardening.